Alright, this is both a warning to the Occupy Wall Street movement and a call to revolution. First of all, I'd like to say that I absolutely support the objectives, aims, and actions of the Occupy Wall Street movement, which is now globalizing. Everyone should support this. Get on board. Things are changing. It's time to be a part of that change. However, there are some major issues which the movement and those who are leading it, driving it, and giving it force and being a part of it in any capacity need to keep in consideration. As the movement grows and becomes more global, more influential, the potential for co-optation and control grows by the day. Just today, billionaire financier and philanthropist George Soros came out in endorsement of the Wall Street protests. So you're going to start to see the attempts at co-optation come quite soon, if not already in play. The mechanism through which a movement is co-opted is largely through finances. If a movement accepts money from nonprofits, from philanthropies or foundations, it essentially loses its energy, loses its principles, and ultimately loses its revolutionary potential. The aim of philanthropy, and the foundations in particular, are in efforts aimed at social control through social engineering. In regards to social movements, and there is a long history of the philanthropies and foundations funding and directing all major social movements, civil rights, environmentalism, anti-globalization, etc. They function in the same way. They take a potentially revolutionary movement, which sets itself against the system, which has the potential to disrupt the entire power structure and social structure upon which the philanthropists themselves sit at the top. Because all these philanthropies and foundations were founded by bankers, billionaires, financiers, industrialists, corporate executives. That's who still sits on their boards. The aim for them is to preserve the social structure. In terms of social movements, they fund them so that they can redirect them from revolutionary into reformist. They promote legalistic reforms. They associate it with political parties. They associate it with certain legislation, certain agendas. They professionalize the leadership of the movements, create nonprofits, create NGOs. They create status, wealth for the leaders, so that the leaders and the movement itself becomes dependent upon the system and a part of that system. They become invited, they start to get invited to international conferences with international organizations and governments, so that they can provide a voice for the people, but in actuality are just participating in the system that oppresses the people. The effect of these potentially revolutionary but ultimately reformist movements is that they actually create consent to the system itself. They act as a valve through which good intentions become ineffective actions. You can't reform, you can't rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's already sinking. We have to start inflating lifeboats, find something else, get away from the system, separate ourselves from the system, disassociate, discredit, and actively build alternatives. There are some major positive things coming out of the Occupy Wall Street protests in New York, which you can see, where through people-funded initiatives via Kickstarter.com, the movement has managed to raise money to start an Occupy Wall Street newspaper, promoting their own ideas, promoting, speaking for them. And it's funded by people, not by philanthropies or foundations or nonprofits or corporations or governments. It's funded by the people themselves. This is important. This is how further initiatives can be funded, organized, and remain decentralized, and remain dependent upon the will of the people writ large to support, not simply through word of mouth, but through their pocketbook. And this is a method through which the movement can remain decentralized, remain grassroots, remain populist and continue to grow. We have to understand the majority of people showing support for this movement are not revolutionary. They're reformist. I've seen footage from some of the protests where the people speak out against Wall Street, but then they support Obama, which is absurd because he's a Wall Street politician. He was put there by and for Wall Street, and he has done everything that they wished. He is Barack Obama. He is their guy in the office. It's absurd to assume that you can support a simple political candidate or a political party, remain disassociated with political parties. Party politics is nonsense. It's a sideshow. It's a circus for the public entertainment. It's a distraction from reality. What is really at stake here, what is really the true challenge, is the institution. Whether it is the state, the political party, the legal system, philanthropic foundations, NGOs, corporations, banks, central banks, psychiatric institutions, the media, various other social, political, and economic institutions. Ultimately, it is the institution itself which is the problem. The institution seeks to define, segregate, control, and oppress humanity, and separate us from ourselves and prevent us from achieving a type of true liberation, true freedom. It's the institution itself which must be fought against. If you take money from the institution, or if you promote reform, reform simply it's a shifting of power, but not to the people. It shifts the power from one institution to the other. So if you seek only to take away power from corporations and banks and give it to government, well, they're already intermingled. There's no separation there. There's no difference. The state is one of the most horrific institutions which has controlled, corrupted, oppressed, defined and reviled humanity and human nature. It's one of the worst institutions in human history. Why would we want to support that? And again, why would you want to support the banks? Why would you want to support the corporations? They all oppress, they all define, they all control, they all segregate people from one another. This can't be about balancing power from one institution to the other. This has to be about discrediting the institution itself and actively creating alternatives to the institutional structure we live in. Now, there was a radical psychiatrist named Franco Basaglia in Italy. He especially rallied against the psychiatric institution itself. And during the process of deinstitutionalization, in which many of the psychiatric institutes in Italy were deconstructed, Franco Basaglia was at the front of this movement. He understood that the institution itself defined the patient, created the illness, created the problems. So to deconstruct the institution, you actually, and this is what he did, you actually had to create alternatives. The patients were involved in physically destroying the institution, in physically destroying the doors, the bars that confined them and controlled them, and turned it into productive elements, turned it into community centers, turned the institutions into educational facilities, got them jobs, engaged them with the wider community so that these people were able to reintegrate with the community, and the community could have to understand these people not as patients in an institution, but as people just like them, with the same hopes, the same dreams, the same ideas, ambitions. And they were able to deconstruct the institution and create something different and new and potentially revolutionary. So this is what we have to do in the wider system, which is entirely institutional. We have to discredit, deconstruct, but actively create and act, forming new collective, individual, and cooperative organizations and movements. We have to create the change that we want to see. We can't demand the 1% to change the whole social structure that their power is based upon. It's absurd to think they would ever do that. We have to simply do it ourselves. And considering that we're the 99%, we can do it. We just have to realize that. So prevent co-optation, prevent control, and move against the institution by creating people-controlled, collectively organized, cooperative, individualistic movements which promote freedom, which promote growth, which promote true liberation. You can't say that human nature is inherently destructive, violent, hateful in any way. If you look at how you define human nature, we'll just take a scientist studying a mouse or mice in a maze. No matter for how long you study those mice, no matter what the maze looks like, what it's made of, you can't understand the mouse outside of the context of the maze. Only when you remove the maze itself can you get a glimpse of the nature of the mouse itself. So for us to truly understand human nature, we have to remove all these barriers which define and segregate and control, corral, oppress, and destroy humanity. Then we have the actual potential to realize what human nature is. And then we can actually construct society to fit in, to conform to human nature, as opposed to forcing human nature to conform to society, which is something that we've done since we created so-called civilization. And the problem dating back to the origins of our civilization is just that. It's that institutional structure which defines our humanity and seeks to conform people within that definition. That clearly hasn't worked. So, time for something new. It's pretty straightforward, but much easier said than done. So, I hope this movement can move forward in a direction which truly challenges the power structures and ideas and institutions and dismantles them in favor of giving people power. The very act itself is empowering. So it seems like just a logical idea that this is the right way to move forward. Avoid co-optation, remain liberated. If you want liberation, you have to act liberated. So I'm hoping to join the movement as soon as I can. I support it, and I wish the best for it.